It'll feel like mid-90s today in D.C., 96 degrees. So summer continues to roll on in areas of the mid-Atlantic and throughout the South. So after some morning clouds, that heat and humidity will be on in New York City this afternoon. Could be our last hot day of the summer. You're watching Morning.
24 past the hour, a new CNN poll finds more than half of Americans say they disapprove of President Trump's job performance. Trump's disapproval sits at 55%. His approval rating remains almost unchanged from last month, down 1 point. Meanwhile, almost 6 in 10 registered voters polled said that Trump does not deserve a second term in office. That's interesting. 39% said he does. There's a brand new Quinnipiac poll from Texas. The president's approval rating in that state stands at 45% among Texas voters. 50% say they disapprove of Trump's job performance. When it comes to the Democrats' race for president, Joe Biden leads the 2020 field by 10 points at 28%. 50% say they disapprove of Trump's job performance. When it comes to the Democrats' race for president, Joe Biden leads the 2020 field by 10 points at 28%. Senator Elizabeth Warren follows in second place at 18%. Senator Bernie Sanders and former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke share third place with 12% of Texas voters backing their respective runs. New polling from New Hampshire shows Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren in a statistical tie. The latest Emerson poll has Biden leading the Democratic field by 3 points at 24% in the first in the nation primary. Warren follows at 21%, and Bernie Sanders sits in third place with 13% of New Hampshire voters backing his run. The poll also takes a look at head-to-heads against President Trump, with Biden leading Trump by 10 points, 55 to 45. Andrew Yang also defeats Trump by 8 points. However, Elizabeth Warren loses to Trump by 2 points, 49 to 51. I feel like that last number is worth discussing, Joe.
Well, I think it is worth discussing. We'll get to that in a second. But, Willie, let's talk about the first numbers we went through. The president's reelected about, I think it's 38%. Over 55% of Americans don't think Donald Trump deserves re-election. His approval rating once again in the 30s. This is again, for somebody who's been president 3 years, the old rule used to be if your re-elect is below 50%, you're in big trouble. Donald Trump's re-elect nationwide is below 40%. And in a lot of the swing states we've seen over the past couple months, it's actually in the low 30s. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how many people blindly give him money, the matrix that they're spitting out there. When you have numbers like that, it reminds me of Brit Hume's famous saying, you know what, you can have all the dog food commercials you want, but if the dog doesn't eat the food, you're out of luck.
Right. I mean, we've talked about this before. People are so bitten by the 2016 election and being so wrong about what was going to happen. They hesitate even at this preponderance of evidence that the president's numbers are just terrible. 39% again. He's never crossed 50% in a major poll. Of course, he'll tweet out one of his outlier polls this morning. 39% and almost 60% of Americans, 6-0, say he should not be reelected. He should not be returned to office. So when you look at those Democratic numbers on the other side, it sets up a very interesting debate tomorrow night, Joe, where for the first time we will see Joe Biden on the stage with Elizabeth Warren, on the stage with Bernie Sanders, and they can have an honest-to-goodness debate about sort of the moderate wing of the party and Joe Biden and the more progressive side of it with Elizabeth Warren and and Bernie Sanders. But this is playing out the way it's played out all summer. Joe Biden holding steady at the top, with Elizabeth Warren surging.
And there's a change at the top in a new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is now ahead.
That's our survey of the Democratic candidates and how they're doing in the early contest. There are 18 states in our aggregate, starting with the Iowa caucus up through Super Tuesday. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is now at 26% support, just ahead of former Vice President Joe Biden at 25%. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, he has 19% support. In the second tier, those are the candidates with higher single digits. California Senator Kamala Harris now has 8% support. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg has 6%. Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke has 4%, and former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker are at 2%.
Mayor de Blasio is near the bottom in a field of candidates showing 1% or less.
You talk to Democrats, and I know you do as well. We all do. And it seems as if they believe, I mean, I'm just reporting what everybody's saying behind the scenes. And that is Joe Biden's campaign seems like a slow motion, like train derailment, that they believe he's not going to make it to the end. It's just what you hear from almost every Democratic insider. And they believe, and many fear, that Elizabeth Warren is moving toward this nomination eventually. If that, in fact, is the case, those New Hampshire numbers, it's only one poll, but those New Hampshire numbers in the head-to-head matchup with Trump actually underline something that I hear from Democrats, a growing fear that she's running a strong campaign but will not be a strong general election candidate.
Yeah, let's stipulate first, Joe, that Elizabeth Warren has run an incredibly great campaign.
Incredible. Incredible.
She was written off earlier this year in the spring, and she's come charging forward. Her rallies are electric. She is specific with her proposals. She does indeed have a plan for most things, but there's a lethal aspect to her campaign when you take the thing to the country in the fall, and it's things like Medicare for all, it's decriminalization along the border, elements like that, where she's got to figure out a way to come back to the middle, and that brings you to Joe Biden. That's where he is. That's what he's run his campaign since the day he announced. He's a moderate. This is a moderate country. You saw that evidence yesterday in North Carolina, which gave every person working for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party an outline of where to go to target their voters and get out the vote in the fall. The suburban voters, the city voters, they're going to go Democrat. You know where the Republicans are going to go.
Real concerns that Elizabeth Warren's running a great race. She's running the strongest campaign. The concerns about Joe Biden keep rising. That's why this third debate is so extraordinarily important to him. But there are a lot of Democrats who fear that Biden's going to collapse, Warren's going to win, and then they're going to have a matchup where Elizabeth Warren gets blown away in states like Texas and states like Wisconsin and states like Pennsylvania that Republicans should be losing.
Yeah, I hear the same thing, and I think the tension for an Elizabeth Warren is if she were to get the nomination, is she able to do the pivot that candidates historically have done and not lose her base and persuade others that she's legitimate? I think there's also the question, Joe, that if you're right, that Joe Biden does ultimately fade, that his support is broader than it is deeper. One of the questions is when and how. And is there time for somebody else to step up and claim the centrist alternative to the progressives, whether it's Kamala Harris or somebody else? So that, to me, is also another subtext of the debate this week, is do we begin to see a centrist alternative to Joe Biden and to either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders?
The other possibility is Joe Biden does really well. And for Democrats, that is the best bet, because it's going to be pretty hard for an Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris to establish that comfort level with perhaps the people who voted for Trump, who need a place to go, who won't do it again. They'll vote for Biden. I'm not sure they'll vote for anyone else in the Democratic field.
Well, you know,
and so the hope for the Democrats, the best hope, is that Biden gets really strong on the stage.
What Donald Trump's team thinks is, even if they don't vote for Biden, right?
Yeah.
They will stay home thinking, well, Biden isn't a, quote, socialist. Biden is not going to take away my family's health insurance. Right. Biden is not going to make us
comfort level,
like find a new pediatrician for our children. Biden is not going to decriminalize illegal immigration, all of these things. So they go, I'm not going to vote for the guy, but I can't vote for Donald Trump either. The guy's just acted too crazy. I'm going to stay at home, and would be one of those.
Biden's the best case
undervotes.
scenario for the
right.
Democrats.
Whereas with Elizabeth Warren, they believe whether it's with Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, they will actually motivate people who are skeptical on Trump to go out and vote. And I think a lot of Democrats, certainly behind the scenes, agree with that analysis.